From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made on January 16th when the film industry lost a luminary. David Lynch, known for his surrealist storytelling and dreamlike imagery, died at the age of 78. And if your social feeds are like mine, you've seen people honoring David Lynch by saying, well, at least we are now essentially living in Twin Peaks. Perhaps you've heard the term Lynchian, inspired by the enigmatic director's style. It's come to transcend film and refer to anything strange or surreal. For nearly half a century, Lynch's work influenced American culture, from his early film Eraserhead to, yes, Twin Peaks, to his music. As Hazel Kills writes for NPR, quote, to truly understand the signature weirdness of a David Lynch movie, you need to pay attention to the music, end quote. Whether you're a David Lynch superfan, as some of our guests are, or if you're not all that familiar with his work, I mean, I know some, but not much. I feel like I'm undereducated on this, and we're going to explore with our guests how it has influenced modern culture, and we're going to preview an upcoming A Little Lynch film series at the Little Theater. That's all coming here. Let me welcome our guests from the Little Theater. Scott Pukas is Communications Director. Welcome back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And Candace Grimes, Events Coordinator. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Tim Stuvey, who is manager of the Dryden Theater at the George Eastman Museum. Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And, you know, the Dryden's taken part in this wonderful event series as well. So we'll talk about that as well. And Theo Trombulak is here as well. Theo is a David Lynch fan. Welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Hi.
All right. So Scott Pukas, I mean, you haven't seen every Lynch film. You haven't seen everything he's ever done, right?
You know, Lynch is kind of a blind spot for me. I have not seen as many as our other guests on here.
You're the encyclopedia. So this is like one of the places, like if you were getting educated, this is where you'd have to cram and study a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the way to experience some of these David Lynch movies for the first time is on the big screen with that communal experience.
Always.
So I'm ready to join in with others here with this series that we're doing at the Little and at the Dryden.
All right, Candace, what's coming up? When does it start?
So we actually already kicked it off at the Dryden. Eraserhead was the first one up. The first one at the Little is going to be Mulholland Drive. That's on Saturday, April 12th at 7:30. And I would say that's another pillar of Lynch's work.
So going down the list here, Saturday, April 19th at the Little, the short films of David Lynch. Wednesday, April 30th at the Dryden, Wild at Heart. Friday, June 13th at the Dryden, Lost Highway, and Wednesday, July 16th at the Little, The Straight Story. Candace, are you in the I know a lot, I know a little, I need to know more David Lynch category?
I am a huge fan of David Lynch. I would say he's one of the greater influences on me as an artist. I'm a photographer and visual artist as well. And I think he really taps into the subconscious. I think that's He uses visual symbolism to sort of speak to people, and that definitely influences me as a photographer, sort of using symbolism and archetypes and things like that.
And let me ask Tim and Theo for some opening comments, and then we're going to figure out what's the question that everybody has been emailing me, who killed Laura Palmer? I guess we're going to get that answered today.
Oh, no, spoilers.
I think it's holding up. Tim, how does Lynch rank for you?
David Lynch is one of my favorite directors for sure. One of the directors that, when I was getting into film, really just opened my mind to the possibilities of film, opened my mind to certain emotions that typical movies don't explore, these strange emotions that you typically have in dreams and that sort of thing. Just really opened up the whole kind of world of surrealist film to me, and is definitely an obsession I've had for quite a while.
And what about you, Theo?
I love how much of David Lynch brought of himself into this world, into this realm. And so I have deep, deep respect for somebody that can bring their own interiority and vulnerability to like the classical physical space of reality and have people understand it, like we were just saying, but on like a visceral level.
Mm-hmm.
So
is there a particular film or something from his repertoire that stands out to you as the top of it?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say that I'm not a super fan in the sense pretty much of anybody. I see what I see, but I love Twin Peaks. It's a beautiful film that blends, like, to me, it's sort of like a bizarro, like Seinfeld almost.
Yeah.
Like
A Bizarro Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's like a really weird it's like a sitcom,
Yeah.
but like if it was a nightmare.
Yeah, and
I love that.
there's like a little soap opera in there too.
Totally.
Yeah.
What about you, Candace? Top of the list?
Yeah, so I love Twin Peaks. I especially love The Return, which was on Showtime somewhat recently. I don't remember. I think it was like 2000, well, maybe like 22. Yeah, so that actually, I think, encapsulates a lot of Lynch's work. Like, I feel like it explains a lot of his films as well. Like, I feel like he really develops his mythos in that series, and was really allowed to play and do things he couldn't do with Twin Peaks being, I think it was an ABC TV show at the time. So I think you get a little deeper view into that. And then I would say, as far as films go, Eraserhead, is one of those movies that I watched and just it changed like who I was as a person. And it just has this visceral, it's kind of like you were talking about, like the things that you don't want to look at or think about. It's that lies deep in your subconscious. It really taps into that, and I think that's why that's a film that sticks with a lot of people.
Why? How has Eraserhead changed you as a person?
Well, he built a lot of the sets. So this was actually a film that he made over several years while he was kind of still in school. And so he used this abandoned building and stables. And so a lot of it is very like sculptural. So just seeing a filmmaker really have a hand in every part and having this vision from start to finish. And I think it just speaks to me spiritually. It's that thing that you can't explain. It's just you feel it when you see it, and I think that's had an effect on a lot of people, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like it at the same time, because it's too much. They don't want to go there. They don't want to think about it. It's disturbing. So I think especially for me as an artist, it just opened up this, it gives you permission to really rely on your vision and your intuition.
Let me, before I get to Tim and then the understudied Scott Poukas on lynching, I want to ask Theo a little bit. I saw your reaction to Candace's point about there's some people who don't like it. Some people are going to be uncomfortable. I don't know if I want to ask if that's a prerequisite for challenging or great art, but do you think that is a common component of really thoughtful art of any kind, that it is not going to be uniformly loved or praised? It's going to have a range of reactions?
Yeah, so I would say that, I think it's are things that are common, are those able to be great? And I personally don't think that's true. I think that there has to be a spectrum of intuition around a work of art that, it's not going to be for everybody. It just isn't. And that's one of the beautiful things about the diversity of the world. And the way that I experienced David Lynch's work was it was a both and. It was very uncomfortable. And in like a sort of almost like being a voyeur to my own dreams kind of way, where I was like, oh, this is happening and I'm watching it and I'm still watching it. So it piques that sort of curiosity in myself to wonder about what it is that I'm capable of experiencing.
Why did it not push you to a point of discomfort where you had to turn it off? Why did you say, I'm acknowledging the discomfort, but I need to see more?
Well, for one thing, it's not real. So I appreciate
helpful.
that about it.
That's helpful.
And, in reflection, I watched those things I watched a lot of David Lynch when I was a little bit younger. And I have less of a capacity to watch bizarro things now as much. So I think that I think it was also at a time in my life when that was very extra fascinating to me. But that being said, I mean, I work in the bizarre and the surreal, so I do it now more than I watch it.
Understood. Tim, is there a top of the mountain of David Lynch for you?
I mean, my typical answer is Eraserhead as well. That's one that's really spoken to me, particularly as a just really low budget film. It's just incredibly impressive. But I'm also really fond of, towards the end of his career in terms of filmmaking, he Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and then his last film, Inland Empire. They all really are not only surreal, but they're very puzzle-like. and you can rewatch them an almost like infinite amount of times, and you always get more, in a way that some of his earlier films aren't quite as puzzle-like as those last films. And I mean, Mulholland Drive is definitely for a lot of people is the top of the list, and that's one that I couldn't watch Eraserhead all the time. I could watch Mulholland Drive like every day. It's so rewatchable.
So I'm curious to know if you think, and if the panel thinks that that we're still seeing films made like that have that level of thoughtfulness, that puzzle-like approach, to where if you rewatch it, then you go, "How did I miss this time?" Or now I'm seeing this a different way. And I'm asking for two reasons. Number one, I mean, is anybody still doing that? But number two, that takes a level of attention and engagement with the audience. And I had this depressing interaction this past weekend with some 13-year-olds at my son's birthday party. I was like, I was like that typical dad who's like, let's not break anything. So maybe, how about I put a movie on? And one of the kids said, people our age don't watch movies anymore. That takes forever. That's like a thing your people your age do. And I was like, oh my gosh, that can't. First of all, I can't believe that's fully true. But I was very worried about that. But then I thought, how much thoughtful filmmaking are we going to have if we are training people to just scroll their phones all the time? Or if you're on YouTube, there's always another video to go to. Kids have told me I don't even finish watching a video. I'm on to the next one, let alone watch a full movie. So this is me like existentially like dreading like where we are and where we're going. Do you think, Tim, that that there are David Lynch either acolytes or analogs in the culture right now?
Oh, definitely. I think David Lynch, in terms of being an inspiring filmmaker for young people, I would say a few years ago that kind of like, I feel like Quentin Tarantino was like the stereotypical everybody in film school loves Quentin Tarantino. I kind of feel like David Lynch is that now. I mean, he's very almost universally loved, and is perhaps maybe less prickly for people than Tarantino it might be nowadays. And David Lynch has a kind of unlike some other film directors, he's also seems like he was a pretty great guy as well, which is important. But yeah, I think a lot of this like new generation of filmmakers, the A24 film distribution company, a lot of stuff that they distribute, and production company, Ari Aster's films, Robert Eggers, a lot of these big directors, indie directors are, David Lynch would definitely be one of the main influences on them, I would say.
Okay. Can I ask the rest of the panel about that? I mean, I heard Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist who's written about the way kids are affected by digital media. He was saying that it's actually a valuable thing for kids to be able, at a young age, to be able to watch a movie all the way through. Now, he recommends doing it with people not in solitary, if possible, because it should be social experiences, etc. But he said that beats the heck out of giving a kid a phone at a very young age and saying, just scroll a feed, doom scroll, look up YouTube. And I'm hopeful that the Little Theater's audiences, the Dryden's audiences, that all of our audiences will continue to be a wide range of ages. But Candace, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. A lot of it does just have to do with the attention span. I think that's one of the goals at the Little, is we love seeing people come and bring their kids, especially kind of their preteens, teenagers, and kind of expose them. A lot of times the parents saying like, oh, I really loved this movie when I was your age. And so, I want you to come and experience it and kind of get your take on it. And then it kind of starts that conversation. But I think left to their own devices, I'm not sure, if they would seek it out. I think David Lynch had a huge influence on me when I was around that age. I saw Blue Velvet probably at too young of an age. And again, it just kind of like opened up this whole new world for me. And so I would hope that, young adults and teenagers now would hopefully have that experience, and maybe it is with some of the films that you mentioned, or filmmakers Eggers and Ari Aster. I do think they're doing similarly thoughtful sort of horror, but more psychological horror. But I think it's a tough one, especially with the subject matter. I think you'd have to have some open-minded parents,
Yeah, I don't want all art to be instant gratification.
Oh, totally.
And so, Theo, am I being too cynical about where we're going as a culture?
I have those moments too. I think it has a lot to do with like how we experience time. If you're getting things at an accelerated rate, then you're experiencing time in a different way than somebody that can really sit in stillness. I think David Lynch could probably speak to that way better than I could because he was a transcendental meditator. And so I think that those things are malleable. Just because you get one thing when you're young, it makes a deep impression, but everything has changed. So no, I don't think so.
Okay. Scott, how do you feel about that? Yeah, I mean, we all want big multi-generation audiences, right?
Yeah, I think there probably are a lot of filmmakers out there who want to make these weird films like David Lynch. Weird movies are my jam. Like, we love showing those at the Little. I love seeing those. I think part of the problem, though, is getting that type of movie made. There's a great new Apple TV show called The Studio, Seth Rogen in it, and there is a bit in it of satire where the head of the studio is like, okay, Barbie was real popular. We need more IP. Let's make a Kool-Aid Man movie. Oh, no. And recently, Warner Brothers announced that their head is like, we need more IP-driven movie. And so that is where a lot of the mainstream is going. So less and less of these weird David Lynch type movies and more of, here's a superhero movie, here's the Kool-Aid Man movie. So I think those filmmakers are out there ready to make these influential, innovative movies, but the challenge is to get them made. And that's why it helps to have people go to the Little and try and support art house movies and show these studios that, yes, these movies are what people want to see.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It's also why we got decades of Marvel movies that started to look all the same. All right, I haven't seen a ton of them, I'm assuming. Now, I shouldn't talk about movies I haven't seen. I get that. But, I mean, it's easy, right? Like, it's a franchise. It's something that's simple. It doesn't challenge you as much. And I'm not denigrating. If you love Marvel movies, listeners, that's great. No problem. But I love the full palette. And I think Scott's points about what gets made, what gets funded, what gets greenlit, what do people who have the power and the money to fund this stuff think that the public wants. So, by the way, do you have, I mean, you have that thinner David Lynch knowledge. Is there something that pops to mind for you?
Yeah, I really like Mulholland Drive. That was the first one I watched, and I was a teen. I was pretty young, and I was into movies with plot twist. And someone's like, oh, well, Mulholland Drive has a great plot twist, and that's a good... And I was like, oh, wait, no. And that's not the type of movie it is. It
really you say plot twist.
Yeah, I was very confused when I first watched it. So I watched it again later knowing what it was, and it's real like dreamlike and surreal, like a lot of Lynch's other works. And I just really enjoyed it. I like that type of movie that doesn't walk you through the plot. Like it goes in a bunch of different directions. And I've never watched it on the big screen, so I'm excited. Again, that's April 12th. That's the first one we have at the Little for this series. And I think, again, I mentioned this earlier, but watching that with an audience of both Lynch fans and people watching it for the first time, I think is really an experience that you can't duplicate just watching these at home. So I'm excited to see that again.
Brian writes to say, I still don't know who killed Laura Palmer. Who is Laura Palmer? So again, I was too nervous to watch Twin Peaks. This is Twin Peaks, right?
Yes.
That's where we are here. So that was a big thing, I guess, on the show. Who killed Laura Palmer?
Absolutely, that's the crux of the show.
Okay.
Thread.
That's
the thread.
That's the starting action. An FBI agent is sent to investigate the murder of Laura Palmer in this small town, Twin Peaks.
Okay.
And he encounters all these characters and subplots and storylines and
And this was an ABC show you mentioned, I think, Candace, right?
Yes, I believe so.
I find that really interesting because this is back, 90s, I think, right? 90s?
Yeah.
That ABC could have someone with that repertoire that Lynch had and make it work within what network broadcast television was in the 90s. So there probably were some limitations.
Oh, yeah.
But the fans of Twin Peaks didn't complain about that. I mean, he created something pretty amazing with those constraints.
Yeah, I will say season 2, you see a lot of that. He did have a partner, Mark Frost, that he worked with, and I think that really helped balance out sort of, you get these really heady David Lynch concepts, but then, like we were saying, there's a little bit of like a sitcom, there's a little bit of a soap opera. So I think in season 1, he definitely has a stronger hand in sort of shaping his vision. And then I think in season 2, they really pushed him to say who Laura Palmer's killer is.
You get the network heads like the people in Lost, like, you got to explain that smoke monster.
Yes, yeah. And so I think he kind of loosened the reins a little bit, and other people sort of stepped in. And towards the end, it wasn't the best. But that's why I think The Return is a great redemption for him in that sense, where they really just let him do whatever he wanted. I mean, you do learn who killed Laura Palmer at the end of Twin Peaks.
You do.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you do, but
Yeah.
but ...
Now I want to watch the whole series because Theo said you do.
Yeah. It's not the most satisfying, but I think when you follow it through with his other works and when you see The Return, you kind of get what he wanted to do.
Because, I mean, we've talked Lost on this. Did you watch Twin Peaks all the way through?
I watched a couple episodes. When I was working at News 8, I would get home late at night and I would put it on TV and try to watch some of it. But I didn't fully stick with it as I was kind of in a tired state of mind.
But it seems like a precursor to this idea that you've got this fan interest in the different, the weird, the funky, the twisty, and then the network suits obsess over people like me, the not very sophisticated viewers who are like, I just want to know what the Dharma Initiative is, as opposed to like not realizing that what I really cared about was great storytelling. I cared about really thoughtful, interesting storytelling, pushing my limits, creating characters I cared about that had depth, that were not one-dimensional. And so over time, I've softened a little on Lost, but it sounds like Twin Peaks is in that category where people were like, well, you better tell them who killed Laura Palmer. I mean, it's like, is that what made it great? Is that what made it great? I'm wondering who was behind this mystery, or was it everything else that was associated with it?
Yeah, David Lynch himself actually referred to the mystery of Laura Palmer as like the golden goose of the show, and why would you want to kill the thing that is fueling the show, which is a great anecdote. But yeah, I mean, Twin Peaks was kind of revolutionary in that it was a crime procedural show where you don't find out who the killer is in the original episode. And when they actually filmed the pilot, they forced them to film 2 versions, one where they show the killer and one where they don't reveal it. And they ended up playing the one where they don't reveal it. You can find the other one if you want, but
smart call, by the way, huh?
Yes, very smart. And if they wouldn't have forced them to reveal it, it would have been a much more interesting season 2. But there's also Fire Walk with Me, which is the movie that's in between the second and third season, which the third season was in 2018. So it's 25 years later. But and that movie is also about the murder, and it kind of explains it in a satisfying way, I would say.
It fills in some gaps for
yes,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, let me read a little bit of feedback from David Lynch admirers. Sarah Abamonte, who is one of our colleagues here at WXXI, sends me this. She says, for me, there are 2 primary things that stick out about Lynch's work. First is that most of it appears completely unbound, and Lynch's openness to different ways of thinking and experiencing the world is what leads to some of the greatest moments in his work. But there are constraints or guardrails to his worlds. By using the surreal and the absurd, he implores us to look beneath the surface, to imagine different ways of being, of communicating, and of being in relationship with others. Lynch rightly confronts us, and I'm thinking particularly of the opening to Blue Velvet here, with the rot that often underlies our mythos. It is only through interrogating ourselves, our beliefs, our bodies, our language, that we can begin to deconstruct these illusions of self and, by extension, society. But can we ever really trust what we perceive as real? Who is more real, Henry Spencer or the lady in the radiator? Who is the real Betty? Who actually killed Laura Palmer? All straightforward questions without straightforward answers. Secondly, any Lynch work is a masterclass on immersive filmmaking. This is not just a plug for seeing the upcoming A Little Lynch films. Exploring Lynch's work, which for me started with the original Twin Peaks TV series with that fantastic score by Angelo Badalamenti and Lynch's own sound design, is what introduced me to the power of sound to drive story, to evoke emotions and atmospheres, and to encode details for the audience that are beyond mere dialogue. A Lynch work is a full sensory experience. Watch the roadhouse sweeping scene from Twin Peaks, The Return. It's absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure we'll still be debating its meaning and context for years to come. And I think that that's one of the biggest gifts that Lynch gave us, the compulsion to peel back the layers, to suspend our filters, to always look or listen closer. Who is the dreamer? That's from Sarah Abamonte.
Why isn't she on here right now? It's amazing.
I don't know. That's pretty good.
That was incredible.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Yeah,
It took the
yeah.
words out of my
Yeah.
mouth. pretty much.
Yeah. We're gonna see if she can come down. You're disinvited.
Yeah,
You,
absolutely.
You out. No, that's Sarah. Kudos. I mean, that's I think a really beautiful tribute to an artist that she really admires. Anything, Candace? Anything stand out about that particular critique that you think hits the mark for you?
Yeah, I think, a lot of his work does kind of deal with the underbelly, like especially in Blue Velvet, which she mentioned, it's kind of the dark side of suburbia, or, there's the surface and then there's what's underneath that we don't want to look at. And so much of his work really does focus on that. And I think it was so well said there.
Suburbia's got a dark side.
Man, everything has a dark side. It's kind of with Lynch's work. It's like there's two worlds. It's we're in the real world, but then there's this other world, and there are these forces. He focuses a lot on like the dark forces, kind of like a daemon, not demon, but like in the Greek daemon, which is like a god or like fate, some sort of powerful influence. And so, it's these people just kind of going about their lives, and then there being these sort of sinister influences on them, and then getting their reaction, or even if they're perceiving that it is happening. And that's a lot in the Lynchian sort of mythos. It's explained, I think, in Twin Peaks: The Return, with the cream corn that they what was it?
Garmonbozia.
Yeah, Garmonbozia. So it's essentially these daemons that feed on pain and sorrow, and it comes out as this sort of creamed corn substance. And so that's kind of what it is. Like that's what he's saying, is that there are these forces that want you to be afraid and sad, so that they can feed on it.
Anything you want to add there, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, David Lynch is very good at depicting evil and dark forces, but he's also actually very good at depicting goodness, I think, as well. Which it's easy to fixate on how good he is at depicting disturbing things, because he really is good at it. But there's parts of his films that are so beautiful and touching and sweet as well. And in Twin Peaks too, the main character Dale Cooper is a genuine role model for the audience. I think not just a protagonist. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that as well. Yeah, there's always these kind of cosmic forces of good and evil.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add there, Theo?
That just got me thinking about how, like thinking about how our ability to deal with reality and is coupled with like our inability to name certain things, that you see characters in these films or in these shows grappling with, experiencing, reacting to evil, or like a I can never say that word, beautiful image, and then not necessarily having the name for it, or not necessarily being able to answer the questions that we as the audience want desperately to be answered. And so that just speaks to the unnameability, I think, of these forces that he shows. And to tie back into what you began with, his ability to use visual storytelling as a way to evoke.
But Theo, what does it say about viewers like me who, you talked about confronting discomfort, knowing it's not real, but kind of sitting with discomfort as a viewer. What does it say about me that so often lately what I choose is easy? It might be an old sitcom, something familiar, and I'm not going. I mean, like even Severance that we talked about, shows like that. I'm like, today's the day. I really want to kind of immerse, and then I go, I don't know if I mentally. I don't know if I can get there. And so like David Lynch, I would love to learn more. I'd love to be really well educated about everything he's done. And then I go like, I don't know if I can do it. What does that say about like, is that just me? Am I weak?
Evan, I can't answer the questions that are inside of you.
I was going to say, that's a psychological question, I think.
Yeah, I can say that I experienced that for sure. And that you don't know until you try.
I think, first of all, it's certainly true you don't know until you try. And my guess is Lynch, Severance, things in those categories, I'd probably sit down and after 30 or 60 minutes go, that was amazing. We should do more of that. I also feel like there are times when things feel kind of angsty or you feel a lot of dread, it's easy to choose like an old comfort blanket. Like, I mean, do you ever do that, Scott?
Yeah, I think a comfort show is absolutely something you turn to. You're like, just if you don't know what to watch, but you want to watch something that's familiar. But I think Lynch can be a comfort show. I think Twin Peaks is a comfort show to some. And maybe if you haven't watched it, that's obviously a different story. But I think for some, that is the comfort show. That is the program they turn to when they're in that mood.
But if the world is too much like a David Lynch movie, I might need a sitcom. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think like to this point, that's why it's so great to experience these films in a theater, because you're really going into this psychological space where it's a dark room and it's this communal experience where you're all having these very visceral reactions and emotions. And I think, if you're sitting down to watch it at home, you might start getting on your phone or get distracted by something else. And I think especially with his work, it's really important to be immersed. So I think getting in the right headspace will definitely be helpful when you're sort of trying to watch a David Lynch film, especially if you're trying to understand it.
And Tim, watch on your own or with company?
Oh, definitely with company. I mean, there is no substitution for the movie theater experience from my perspective. And David Lynch was actually a very vocal proponent of not watching movies on your phone and that sort of thing. You can find some clips of him talking about this. But he was very passionate about the movie theater. And a lot of his films have qualities that are playing off of tropes like from the movie theater itself, like the red curtains that recur throughout his work. There's actually like projector bulbs that show up in his work and stuff. So he like really admires the cinema. And so it's clear like there's no replacement for it. And not only because of visual, but I think especially because of sound. It's really hard to get good sound at home. And that's the immersive sound of a movie theater is really key for a David Lynch film for sure.
Well, after we take our only break of the hour, I've got some more listener feedback as we talk about David Lynch, who passed away a couple of months ago. And his work is being celebrated in a film series. It's The Dryden and the Little, a Voltron of Awesome as part of the series. You guys can use that title.
I think we might.
That's
I might steal that.
That's pretty good. The next one coming up Saturday, April 12th. That's a couple Saturdays from now. Mulholland Drive at the Little, and then the Little and the Dryden are going to be sharing more of David Lynch's work as the weeks go on. They're calling it a Little Lynch over at the Little. I like that, but we'll have a link if you want to take a look at the calendar coming up for that. We've got a couple clips to share with you after this break as well, if you want to hear a little bit more of Lynch and the Lynch effect, and we'll share more of your feedback on the other side of this break.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. MaryCariola.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. John in Pittsford calls in to say, if you want a good insight into Lynch, check out his FBI character portrayal from Twin Peaks.
Yeah. I love it so much.
Okay.
He's amazing.
For a second there, so it was like, yes, and Thea was like, really? So is this like not a main character? Is this?
He is a main character in Twin Peaks.
Okay.
He's Dale Cooper's boss, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was processing what you said auditorily. Yes.
Gotcha. So this is, in John's view, a pretty good insight into David Lynch's skill. Why do you think so, Candace?
Well, you really get a sense of his personality. I feel like he based the character a lot on himself. He has a very distinct way of speaking. He's a great sort of comedic pause, I think, anytime that character's on screen, which is interesting because a lot of times he's talking about murder and crime and things like that. But yeah, you get to see him interact with Kyle MacLachlan that plays Dale Cooper, and they work really well off one another. But yeah, I think it's, kind of our first time seeing him on screen, and you just can't help but love him,
Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think so. The character Gordon Cole in Twin Peaks, who becomes increasingly important as you watch the show. It's such a dark and troubling show at times, and then the creator of the show comes on as a character, and he's like the funniest character in the whole series, in my opinion. He's just like incredibly funny. He's not just comedic relief, but yeah, just everything about him. He wears hearing aids and stuff. He can't hear very well, and so he's constantly shouting at people, and it's really very funny.
We haven't really talked about humor as part of the Lynch playbook. There's humor there, Theo?
Of course.
I mean, like, I love the idea that because Scott and I, who are not as deep into David Lynch, I have this idea that it's always a grind. Like, it's like every episode is just a grind. But no. Okay. Yeah.
He does have a great humorous cameo role in Steven Spielberg's most recent movie, The Fabelmans. So he shows up at the end in a cameo role, and it is like the art house version of Avengers or a superhero movie where someone big shows up on screen and everyone cheers and applauds. Yeah. That was our screening at the Little of the Fabelmans when David Lynch comes in and appears at the end and kind of steals a few scenes like right at the very, very end of that movie that's like the art house version of, I guess, Avengers or Spider-Man, where everyone just goes crazy with applause.
Well, here's our colleague Mona Segatola-Salami down the hall at Classical 91.5, a David Lynch fan who wanted to send the following. She said, sure, there's surrealism, a specific sort of American surrealism, and he's created some of the darkest, weirdest images that live in my brain. But there's also such a goodness and a wholesomeness and belief in the beautiful and the good, along with a love or worship of classical Hollywood that is expressed so richly. And in his films that, as I say, he has included some of the creepiest images, but he has, both in his works and in his comments, put forward some of the things that are the most encouraging and life-affirming. He also has great taste of music, and it makes amazing use of sound. Especially, you can hear that Racerhead in Twin Peaks: The Return. So that's Mona, kind of the different sides. The dark and the wholesomeness is an interesting word there.
I think we should talk about coffee and pie because we haven't mentioned that, and they're very important to Twin Peaks. And I think that kind of gets to that where it's like Dale Cooper just purely enjoys a good cup of coffee and a slice of pie. So even though there's all this happening, he's investigating this murder, all these characters, he can go to the diner and have a good cup of coffee and a slice of pie. So I just think it's a message about sort of like taking those moments where you can, and fully enjoying the things that you enjoy.
Do you know how committed you have to be both as the creator and then in the audience to even realize that he's telling you more than just there's a cup of coffee and a piece of pie? There's a consistent message. I just love that. And Mona Segatola-Salami is someone else I could just listen to talk about anything. So
yeah, she's amazing.
We love you, Mona. That's great stuff there. We've got a couple of clips to share with you that our guests have helped pick out. The first is from Lost Highway. And we're going to listen to this scene. Now, again, this is not a film I've seen, but Fred Madison, jazz saxophonist, shares an affectionate relationship with his wife, Renee, but his life changes when he receives a threatening message from a mysterious man. And this is a clip from a party in the film featuring Fred and that man.
We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so. Where was it you think we met?
At your house, don't you remember?
No, I don't. Are you sure?
Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
What do you mean you're where right now?
At your house. Call me. Dial your number. Go ahead. I told you I was here.
How'd you do that?
Whoa.
It gives me chills just listening to it.
Same.
The sound mixing is incredible.
Yeah.
Impending sense of doom.
Yeah. And their voices, the way that their voices are extremely similar, but there's just like one note in the voices that's different to me and to my ears, feels so just like such a mind fudge.
Nice.
That's a really interesting observation. Yeah, that's. Well, let me just zoom out a little bit, though, for those who haven't seen Lost Highway. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So in this scene, this character has gone to this party with his wife. He steps away from his wife for a moment and gets a drink. And you can hear the sounds of the party. There's music. And then this man comes up. I don't believe there's a visual. So just to visualize it, the man has a very pale face. It doesn't look natural. And as soon as he walks up, the music and the sound of the party just like cuts out of the film. And he obviously kind of does this very creepy thing to this man. This is the first time we've met this character. And then that happens. He calls him at his house, and then he walks away. And we see him later in the film, but it's just it's just an total intrusion to the scene.
Even in listening to that one clip, which is all I've ever heard from Lost Highway, it has me going like, is this real? Or is this like is this on some kind of alternate plane going on here?
Right.
Yeah. Doesn't he see that man's face on his wife like before that scene happens?
That is the first appearance. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Very
he's being intimate with his wife and gets this flash of this
Oh.
horrible face.
Oh,
And so it's that man that then approaches him and is like, "Hey, I saw you at your house, remember?"
Yeah.
So it's it's a little bit of uncanny, spooky.
it's not what you want in a moment.
No,
of
it's not
intimacy.
what you want.
No,
This-
it's not optimal. You can see Lost Highway, by the way, as part of the upcoming series at the Dryden. If you want to mark your calendar for Friday, June 13th. Again, see it in the theater, right, Tim? I mean, like,
Yes, definitely.
Come on.
And on film as well, on 35 millimeter film from our archives.
And the series is going to wrap in July 16th, with The Straight Story. I had never heard of this one. We got a clip from The Straight Story. He did a G-rated film for Disney.
A G-rated Disney movie, yes.
A David Lynch G-rated film for Disney.
Came out in 1999 too. Best movie year ever.
So is that right?
Yeah.
Is that like what people in film say 99 was the best ever?
Yeah, well, there's a book about it, how 1999 is the best year. I agree with that, so I always tell everyone. Candace is rolling her eyes a little as I talk about it.
It's the best year
I
in
mean, he
film.
does.
It might have just been the best year for the world. It's like downhill from there.
Yeah, 99 was great.
No, the best is yet to come. Okay, so here's a little bit of background here. A G-rated film here for Disney about a retired farmer and a widower in his 70s. His name's Alvin Straight. He learns one day that his distant brother Lyle has suffered a stroke and may not recover. So Alvin wants to make things right with his brother. He doesn't have a car, doesn't have a way to get from Iowa to Wisconsin, so he has an idea. He's going to ride his trusty old lawnmower there, and this is a clip from the beginning of that journey.
Alvin! What are you setting out to do here? That's why I am! Alvin, you're gonna get blown off the road. That's what I'm afraid.
You'll never make it past the grotto.
Straight Story. I mean, Scott, have you seen this?
I haven't seen this one, but we were talking about before the show that we want to encourage someone to ride a lawnmower from the Dryden to the Little to come watch this.
As promotion.
Has anybody in the room seen this one?
I have, yeah, a few times.
And?
It's great. It's great. As we were talking about the wholesomeness, the goodness, this is that part of David Lynch without any of the darkness or,
There's nothing like surrealist or Lynchian.
No. It as it says, it's a straight story. There's some parts that might feel a little bit Lynchian, but not in terms of surrealism or nightmares or anything like that. Yeah.
I think the road is a symbol in Lynch's work. So I think that's a little bit of a connection. If you think about, just Lost Highway and Wild at Heart. And,
Yes.
But yeah, I haven't actually seen Straight Story though.
Oh, wow. I just got the thought that like if his whole work, if you symbolize it as like pieces of a road, that's like the part of the road, right? Like nothing bad happens on this part of the road.
You don't go to the fork. You're staying straight.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys are amazing. Jay writes in to say, one great thing about David Lynch that we can revisit from was his long series of weather reports from Los Angeles. His dispatches did opine on weather conditions, but also conditions of the spirit of place with a twinkle in his eye. David always invites us into conversations into landscapes, both inner and outer. Okay. The weather reports.
They were amazing. During the pandemic, it was like such a source of joy, I feel.
So this was a pandemic activity he took up.
I think he was doing it before, but it really started trending, because everybody was just on the internet. Nobody could leave. So it just kind of became one of those bright spots where it's like, David Lynch is still out there doing his thing. We can do it.
That's a comfort. Roger writes to say, I'm not too familiar with David Lynch's work. I'm very familiar with John Waters' work. He's my favorite writer and director in that he forces us, very hilariously, to look at our own puritanical and even dark sides. Are your guests familiar with John Waters' work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not to the level of Lynch, perhaps?
Yeah, they're both from, or not from, but both resided in, I think, Philadelphia for a while. So that's kind of an interesting connection. But, or no, I'm sorry. John Waters is from Baltimore. But there's some visual similarities in terms of dilapidated industrial landscapes that they use. John Waters is much more comedic and much more cynical, I would say, too. But he's so charming. So,
well, as we get ready to wrap here, I want to let our guests talk a little bit more about why they, if they want to try to convince you, or if they think that you would benefit from bringing some David Lynch into your world, if you haven't already. David Lynch passed away at the age of 78 just a couple of months ago, and the Dryden and the Little are teaming up for this film series that has already started. You missed Eraserhead, which apparently is like the top of the list here.
The pinnacle, yeah.
But you got a lot more to come. Mulholland Drive is next. The short films of David Lynch, Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, The Straight Story, all coming your way at the Little or the Dryden. And you should check out their websites, and we'll have links in our show notes so you can check out the upcoming series. But I apologize, Scott knows I get stuck on these themes like Lost, but like I'm thinking about what kind of a bad viewer I was for 6 years of a show that I claimed to love, but then I just demanded answers to stuff that in the end didn't really matter without realizing I was in it for totally different reasons. I was in it because I did love great storytelling. I did love the characters. I didn't need everything to be tied up with this perfect bow, that I could accept that I wasn't going to get answers to certain things that I once thought were interesting if it took me somewhere, if it made me feel something or think something. And I just want to ask you to kind of talk a little bit about what is, in your eyes, the first ingredient of something great. I mean, do you need great storytelling? Do you have to have a dynamic or great character? Can it be something atmospheric or surreal or different? What's the measure of that for you, Scott?
Oh yeah, that's a tricky one. Yeah, I definitely think the storytelling aspect, and not necessarily the details of what happened. So if I haven't seen something in a while, like some of these Lynch ones I have seen, but like Lost Highway, but it's been so long, so I don't remember exactly like plot details, but I remember how I feel and felt when I watched it, and especially the clip that we played. I remember just getting chills and being creeped out. So that is what sticks with me, that feeling of what emotions are going through me when I'm watching. So I like those elements of the storytelling, like how a filmmaker can evoke that from a person, whether it's whatever emotion, whether you're laughing, you're crying, whatever it is. I think those emotions really are the key to a good story and a good film.
What's a sitcom that you've seen every episode of all the way through?
Seinfeld.
Okay. If you went back and watched a random episode from season 3, season 4, you might say to yourself, I've watched this so many times, I don't remember this plot. But you'll remember that you loved the show for different reasons. It's the same thing. It doesn't have to be like a David Lynch, I've seen it once. Even the stuff you've seen a ton of. It's amazing. You go back and you go, how do I not remember this plot? Or how do I not remember that this happened? I've seen it a bunch, but you remember how it made you feel.
Yeah, and watching it again, so like if it's Seinfeld or whatever, you'll laugh just like you did the first time. And it's the same with David Lynch or another filmmaker that you adore too, that you watch it, I'm like, man, I love this just as much as that very first time. And sometimes even more. You appreciate it more. You're like, oh, this is just such a good scene.
I mean, do you remember the Kramer Enema episode?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, see, I thought just giving you a random one there. Theo, what in terms of creation of art, is there one ingredient that matters most here?
Honesty.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I don't think that it's possible to be dishonest and make art that can speak for yourself. What's it saying?
Candace, you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I'm in a similar vein of thinking, because I think what makes David Lynch so great is that he does have this vision, and he's very authentic and true to himself, and that's why you don't see him doing a lot of studio films. You know, he did Dune, but there was a little bit of friction because of that, because they really tried to put him in a box, and so I think with other films it's the same. When you see, you know, this filmmaker really creating from start to finish this singular vision, and there's an authenticity there. So even it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. Again, like going back to what Scott said, it's how it makes you feel, and also, you know, just sort of receiving that message and connecting with that artist in that way.
Tim?
Yeah, I think, and this is something David Lynch would say often, is one of the main things that drives art is ideas. And he would meditate until he got an idea for a lot of his films. That's how he came up with a lot of his concepts. And I really think that's key to his work, is and to all great art, is having an idea. And it doesn't even have to make sense in terms of our usual sense of the word. It can be a subconscious idea, a dreamlike idea, but to have a really strong idea, and to, you know, infuse it with emotion and sincerity, I think is key.
Well, I hope you have a lot of folks finding that community, seeing this together. I mean, it's one thing to stream everything. We're in a stream everything world, but I know I'm a homer for the little, and I love the Dryden, but see it in person, be with people, have that experience together when you can. It really matters. Tim Stuvey, great having you. Thank you for being here. You'll find him over at the Dryden Theater at the George Eastman Museum. From the little, Scott Poukas, Candace Grimes, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And Theo Trombulak, thank you for sharing your insights this hour as well.
Thanks for having me.
And from all of us at Connections, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on the WXXN News YouTube channel. We're back with you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.